All right, let's talk about a massive, landscape-shifting political earthquake that just completely shook up the electoral map. In this explainer, we're breaking down the Michigan Democratic Senate primary. This was an absolute slugfest that ended in a staggering upset. It's a race that pitted two entirely different visions for the Democratic Party directly against one another, and the outcome, well, it has massive implications for the balance of power in Washington. If you want to understand where the political momentum is heading into the midterms, you absolutely have to look at what just happened in the Great Lakes State, because for sure, it's a preview of the battles to come. To make sense of this whole complex battle, here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at the primary upset itself. Second, the progressive versus establishment divide. Third, the money factor. Fourth, the clashing campaign messages. And finally, what the stakes are for the general election. Let's get right to it. Section 1. A major primary upset, and how Abdul El-Sayed clinched the nomination. Okay, so let's dive into this. The big breaking news is that Abdul El-Sayed, who's a former public health official, officially defeated the heavily favored four-term Congresswoman Haley Stevens to win the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate in Michigan. By stepping up to succeed retiring Senator Gary Peters, El-Sayed has effectively secured a massive Midwestern beachhead for the progressive left. This wasn't just some routine primary. It's a real game changer because it proves that the insurgent progressive wing, which, we've typically seen score victories in deep blue states like New York or Colorado, can successfully march right into a purple industrial battleground state and take the nomination. Section 2. Progressive versus establishment, and the ideological divide in the Democratic Party. To truly understand this upset, you have to look at the powerful factions that aligned behind each candidate. It's really a perfect snapshot of the ideological divide currently running right through the center of the Democratic Party. On one side, El-Sayed was championed by national progressive figures like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who literally barnstormed the state for him. And crucially, he secured the endorsement of the United Auto Workers, which is just a massive, influential deal given Michigan's car-making pedigree. Conversely, Haley Stevens represented the highest levels of the party establishment. She was backed by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the retiring incumbent Senator Gary Peters, and Michigan's highly popular Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who actually stepped in late in the race in a last-ditch effort to halt El-Sayed's momentum. So El-Sayed countered all that establishment weight with a really focused populist platform. He leaned heavily into a push for Medicare for all and loudly condemned the influence of corporate money in politics. Furthermore, his platform featured really sharp criticism of U.S. aid to Israel and accusations that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. And as the demographics show, this is a uniquely resonant issue in Michigan since the state is home to large Muslim and Arab American populations. His very clear stance on this was absolutely central to building his grassroots appeal. Section 3. The money factor. And this truly was a David versus Goliath financial battle. You just can't talk about modern political campaigns without talking about money, and this was a historic financial mismatch. A staggering $65 million in outside money was deployed to stop Abdul El-Sayed. To put that into perspective, more than $30 million of that total came from a group affiliated with AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Now, while a lot of this money was spent positively promoting Haley Stevens, a really significant chunk of it was used for direct messaging attacks against El-Sayed. The spending gap here is honestly jaw-dropping. Stevens and her allies vastly outspent El-Sayed's coalition by a ratio of 9 to 1. 9 to 1. But El-Sayed ended up using this massive disadvantage as a weapon on the debate stage. He literally looked at Stevens and said, quote, "If you need a $60 million crutch, you probably can't be elected on your own terms." Ultimately, that message really resonated with voters, making this one of the most remarkable financial upsets we've seen in recent political memory. Section 4. Clashing campaign messages, bitter rhetoric, and leaked audio. After a third candidate, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, dropped out of the race, the primary essentially became a two-person pressure cooker. And man, the rhetoric got incredibly sharp. There simply wasn't any room left between Stevens' massive TV ad blitz and the raw grassroots energy behind El-Sayed. A major flashpoint happened when audio from an El-Sayed donor call leaked to the press. On this call, El-Sayed suggested that a victory for him in Michigan could reverberate all the way into the 2028 elections by encouraging progressive primary challenges against more moderate Democrats, and he specifically named Senator John Fetterman. He called this strategy putting an ogre on a pike. That was a very stark warning directed right at the establishment. Now, Stevens, on the other hand, argued that El-Sayed was way too focused on national politics and social media drama, rather than the everyday kitchen table needs of Michiganders. During a debate, she simultaneously brushed off and kind of leaned into social media snark about her appearance and her upper Midwest accent. She said, quote, "These folks are making fun of the way I sound, but yet I sound like the people who need help, who are talking to me about what they need." It was just a classic clash of campaign strategies, right? The national populist movement on one side versus the hyper-local pragmatist approach on the other. Section 5, the general election stakes and why Michigan matters so much for the U.S. Senate. So what does this all mean for November now that the primary is over? Let's zoom out to the national map for a second. The Democratic Party is facing some brutal mathematics. The current balance in the U.S. Senate sits at 53 Republicans to 47 Democrats. That means Democrats don't just need to hold their ground, they have to go into red states and flip 4 seats just to swing the majority. But while they're playing offense, they also have to desperately defend their current seats in battleground states like Georgia and, you guessed it, Michigan. A loss in Michigan would make their path to a Democratic majority almost impossible. Which brings us to this fascinating, almost ironic piece of political strategy from the right. The Republican nominee, former Representative Mike Rogers, won his primary totally unopposed, with the early backing of Donald Trump. And here's where it gets interesting. National Republicans, including the National Republican Senatorial Committee, actually produced digital ads highlighting El-Sayed's progressive credentials and his endorsement from Bernie Sanders. Why would they do that? Well, they calculated that El-Sayed would be a much easier opponent to defeat in a general election than Haley Stevens. Keep in mind, this is a state that Donald Trump won in both 2016 and 24 before losing it to Joe Biden in 2020. The GOP clearly sees a massive opening here against a progressive candidate. And that leaves us with the ultimate question as we look toward the general election. We know Abdul El-Sayed can defy the establishment and overcome a $65 million deficit to win a nomination. But can an insurgent populist movement truly hold the line and win a purple industrial battleground state in November? The Republicans are betting everything they can't. The progressives are absolutely confident they will. Either way, the eyes of the entire nation will be firmly fixed on Michigan. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time as we continue to break down the headlines.